and I want to introduce Tabitha Moore, class of 2000. Tabitha's with us tonight to explore the ins and outs of racial justice work in her home state of Vermont and the perils that come when we try to center anti-racist practices in the places that need it the most. Tonight, she'll offer tips and reflective questions that you can take with you, whether you are a justice novice, a warrior, or a longtime leader. Tabitha, we're really excited to have you tonight, and I will get your PowerPoint going in just a moment here. So go right ahead.
Okay. Well, it's great to be here with all of you today. It's been a while. I was saying since I've been back at Wells, I have so many amazing memories on campus there. I don't know if you all are doing classes in person or not, but it was a wonderful place and transformative for me. And I hope it is for those of you who are attending or still working there, like Ellen. Thank you so much. So for tonight, I will just tell you I'm probably as irreverent, if not more, than I was back in my years at Wells. So I put together some slides for you, but I'm all about you interrupting to get what you need out of this, because this is less about me and what I need and more about you being able to get something from the experience or the tips that I provide tonight. So I'm really hoping for a robust dialogue with you. So you want to hit the next slide? I'm not used to not having control of my own slides, so this will be fun. So here we go. Okay, so a little bit about me. I did graduate in 2000, go Evans. I played field hockey when I was at Wells. I was not planning on it, but had a wonderful time. So I encourage you all to get involved in things if you're not already. I come from Vermont, and I actually ended up moving back here in 2009. When I left in 1996, I swore I was never coming back, never having kids, and never getting married. And in 2009, as I'm like driving back from Syracuse in my U-Haul with my then husband and 2 kids, I was like, something changed. So needless to say, I like to eat a little bit of crow now and then, although I'm divorced and have 3 kids. Way better deal. So that's really important for me in terms of what I'm presenting to you tonight, because as you know, Vermont is the whitest, if not, we go back and forth between like Vermont and Wyoming and Maine in terms of being the whitest state. So being able to do racial justice work in majority white spaces is something that is near and dear to my heart, and it's part of the reason that I came back here. I'm a mother, like I said. I have 3 children. The eldest is just turned 18 on, what is it, 2 days ago, and I have a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old as well. And for something I was never planning on doing, boy, am I sure glad that I did, because it's changed my kind of view of humans by doing that. And then the third thing I'd say that's probably important for you to know about me is that I come from an activist perspective. People are like, "Oh, yes, of course." But I'm working with this project called a Horizons Brain Trust, which is a national initiative to bridge the gap between peace building and social justice movements to figure out how we can work better together. And I realized through that work that I'm definitely in the activist camp over the peace builder camp. But I do appreciate both. So in my role as an activist at Wells, I was an activist. As I left Wells, I was an activist. I really appreciated the opportunity to be able to really stretch and grow in that regard. I was collegiate president when I was there, and we really started having conversations about how do we be inclusive of our trans and non-binary family who were at Wells when we were there. So as weird as it was for us to go what we called co-ed, to me, the beautiful thing is that ended up allowing people with all kinds of gender identities to feel welcome in the space. And I hope that everyone does. So next slide, please. Just a couple notes. Oh, where are the notes? All right. Well, it looks like can you go forward one more? Let's see if the notes are there. No, go back 2 slides, please. This is going to be fun. So I'm going to pull up mine too. So just a couple of notes for you about what I'm doing tonight. Like I said, I really want to make sure that this is fruitful for you and not just a chance for me to talk about and brag about things. But a few things you'll notice about the way that I'm doing it tonight. The first thing is that I've been really working to decolonize my practice as a trainer, educator, community activist person. So I no longer center whiteness in my presentations, or I'm really practicing not centering whiteness, which is really difficult to do. So what that means is that you'll notice that all of my slides tonight and the majority of this conversation will be geared toward Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Speaking of which, I think you need to go back 2 slides to the Cayuga Nation. Is it there? No. Huh. You got some slides missing. Anyway, so as part of my work, I'm no longer centering whiteness in my presentation. So this isn't really going to be about white people. So if you identify as white and you're in here, I want you to take what you can from this and think about how you're going to change the ways that you are in relationship to BIPOC who are in your institutions, who are trying to do the work, and how you can be a good accomplice, ally, anti-racist, whatever it may be. Along those lines, I'm sad that the slide didn't make it in here. I don't know why. I just literally just made it. One of the things that I really want to do is make sure that we, in the process of doing anti-racist work, is center the needs and need for reconciliation and reparation to the indigenous peoples of this land. And given that Wells sits in the heart of the Cayuga Nation, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge all that they have been through, everything that they've lost, the genocide that they've overcome, the fact that they're still there. Please donate whenever you can to the Cayuga Nation. We have to keep our indigenous people alive, because we are to undo racism. We have to start by acknowledging what happened on this land and following the incredibly rich thousands of year old history of the people that cultivated what is now Wells College. So just a couple of other quick notes while you're reading my favorite Audre Lorde quote over there. There's no shortcut, right? I can't give you particular, I can give you some methodologies and some strategies and things like that, but there is no one tried and true way to do anti-racist work in majority white spaces. The only consistent thing is that it's done through relationships. So how you do relationships will be really critical. So what you're going to see are a few of the mentors and leaders that I've had along the way in terms of some of the quotes that drive me and guide me in my work in majority white spaces. These are the quotes that I turn to, and that I hope that maybe if you haven't seen them already, they can provide something for you too along your journey. But it's really through the relationships. And on that note, in terms of relationships, there are a couple of people that I absolutely 100% have to thank with my whole heart and soul. And one of them is on this call, and that would be Ellen Hall, who was dean when I was here at Wells. And I remember sitting in Ellen's office saying, you know, like, I really love psychology, but I love women's studies. And I absolutely love to do language too. I really want to study Spanish and, you know, Latino American stuff. And I'm like, I don't know what major to choose. And Dean Hall goes, you don't have to choose, Tabitha. You can do them all. I was like, really? And that kind of began my intersectional journey in terms of realizing that people, I don't have to fit into one category or another. I can, you know, be who I am and do what I need to do. That there are rules that are kind of more like guidelines, right? They're there to just kind of give you a sense of the things that you can do in life. And so if it wasn't for Ellen, I definitely would not have had that experience. So thank you. And I'd also like to thank Vic Munoz, who's not on this call, but was one of the most amazing mentors I ever had in helping me to free myself from even more kind of rigid boundaries around things like gender and sexual orientation and sex and just the body and spirit and mind, and was a great mentor in my individualized major journey. And Pilar Greenwood, I don't know if she's still there, and Miguel Hill, just some really wonderful people at Wells that really guided me in my practice and made me who I am. And I believe that somebody put a pre-written land acknowledgement to the Cayuga folks that is from Wells College. So thank you for doing that. And for me, as a brown person, when I do land acknowledgements, it's a little different, particularly because my people were stolen and forced to come here onto the land of another people. For me, and I benefit from that today. And make no mistake, my people benefit from what happened too, which is why for me, I always try to ask people to donate money to the local people so that they can figure out what they need to do with it rather than us. So it's not enough just to say something, we have to do something. So let me make sure that those are all my notes that I wanted to get out there. Just a couple more. One is that, like I said, this is going to be dialogue based, and you are the one. I can tell you a lot of different things today, but nothing will ever substitute or suffice for you and who you are and your authentic self and what you bring to this journey. So if you forget everything else that I show you tonight, remember that you are the only one that can do what you're going to do. So step bravely into it. And speaking of bravery, Audre Lorde was one of my first and my favorites. And Audra said that when we dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid. And I find that too often, those of us who are in majority white spaces, it's really easy to be afraid. It's really easy to sit back and let them wash over you, to let white values and white norms prevail. But that voice inside you that's saying that something's not right, you have got to be able to be courageous enough to listen to it and then to speak in its honor. Because if you do not speak in its honor, it will speak for you in all kinds of ways. And I've seen in myself and in other people that we start acting out, whether it's in the workplace or in school, we start getting a little smarmy, a little attitudey, because there's this thing within us, this fire that's telling us that this is not right, that what we're doing is not in keeping with what the ancestors would want us to do. So please be courageous. And if you are doing it in the service of your vision, that fear eventually becomes less and less of a factor as to whether or not you act, because it becomes a thing that if you're listening to that voice, you have to act. And along those lines, the next slide, please. Just a few quick tips around being courageous. These two questions are really critical for anybody who's going to be getting into anti-racist work anywhere, but especially when you are in white spaces. The first one is, what do you believe to be true? What do you believe to be true about race? What do you believe to be true about power? What do you believe to be true about the ability for people to change? Those are so critical for you to understand about yourself. Sorry, my dogs are excited. So I forgot that I'm a dog mom. I didn't forget. They never let me. I have 4 dogs, and hey, it's okay. They like to protect me. Hey, we're okay. We're safe. Thank you. And a little bit about that, actually. Hey, part of the reason my dogs are so easily irritated is because as part of my activism and my not being afraid, I was targeted by white supremacists in Vermont. A lot of people don't realize that Vermont is one of the fastest growing communities, because it's essentially one community because it's so small, for white supremacist activity, because everybody thinks because Vermont is so liberal that white supremacists don't exist here. It's not a problem here. But they do, and I was targeted, and my daughter was targeted. And so last November, we had to up and move suddenly. So there was a lot of stuff going on, like my signs were vandalized outside, my Black Lives Matter sign was vandalized outside my house, like all kinds of stuff like that happened. That's what happens when you're effective. People are gonna mess with you. Just get ready for that. Buckle up if it hasn't happened already. So ever since we moved, my dogs are very skittish. So the minute the wind blows, they're like, what was that? So it's amazing how animals can pick up on energy. So there's my little aside, and they stopped barking, so we can continue. What do you believe to be true about race, about power, and about people's ability to be changed? It is so critical that you understand your beliefs, because you're going to be bumping up against everyone else's. And then the next one, and white people, this is really big for you, because brown people are always losing something. We're always giving up something in order to be in white spaces, some piece of ourselves. But it's really important for us not only to take inventory of what we're losing so that we can replenish it later, but also be willing to know how far you were willing to go. What are you willing to lose in service of that vision? Because you should not force yourself to go one step further. Okay? And in what context are you willing to lose what? It becomes really important for self-preservation, as well as that sense of fearlessness, that courage, or not even fearlessness, courage that you're going to need in order to step boldly into those places that you have to be and say those things that need to be said. Next slide, please. My man, James Baldwin. If you have not seen I Am Not Your Negro, get the movie. I think it's on Netflix or something. Hearing this was one of the most affirming things that I'd ever experienced in my life. We can disagree and still love each other unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denial of my humanity and right to exist. Now, white folks have been saying this particularly in the last 4 years, but brown and Black people, Indigenous people, people of other races, we know what this feels like, because it sounds like, oh, well, I like to argue about politics. We're just having a civil discussion. I don't understand why you get so riled up. It's really not that big of a deal. We're just talking about a policy. This is about the teacher's contract. And don't think I haven't been paying attention to what's been going on at Wells with professors' contracts and things like that. I'm watching what's happening there. And I see a lot of this happening. This dynamic is underlying it, right? So this whole idea is that people will gaslight you in your places of work, in your places of, leisure, wherever you may be. And they'll say, we're just disagreeing. It's really not that big of a deal. Yes, it is a big deal. Because what is at the heart of politics is humanity. And I think it was it Carol Gilligan? Who was it that said the personal is political? Feminist scholar. Gosh, I was Vic. We're on here.
No, it wasn't Carol Gilligan. I'm sorry I was late. I just
hey.
Vic's here.
Yeah, it wasn't Carol Gilligan. I don't know. Gloria Steinem? I don't know.
It was Tina Apteker. Listen, it was one of the most powerful moments of my life. The personal is political, right? So whenever somebody tries to tell you that they're just having a political discussion or that they just enjoy, argument for the sake of argument when it's your life on the line, that is somebody you do not need to be in close relationship with. Rachel Porter's got it.
Carol Hanisch, under the title "The Personal is Political" in 1970, I think.
All right, so I got the Carol right.
That was my first. That was my first Google search.
I love it. Right. And I think what's powerful about this particular quote is that we can disagree and still love each other unless your disagreement is rooted in my impression. So then what you have to ask yourself is, if you don't love each other, what is your relationship to that person? Right? If they are disagreeing with your right to exist, if they are disagreeing with your right to be free of oppression, what does that mean for you? How do you want to relate to people who are like that? Because they're going to be everywhere. If you're not already doing the work, particularly if you are BIPOC, you are likely experiencing this. So getting real with yourself and reflecting on what does that mean is going to be really important to your own self-preservation. And a couple more tips. Chris, if you please. Okay, so a few tips in the workplace that I've found, or when I'm doing work, anti-racist work. And just a quick aside for you is that, so I'm in my day job currently, I work with child welfare workers. I train child welfare workers. And for the last 21 years since I left Wells, my work has been to explore the institutions that control our lives. So I'm a marriage and family therapist. I got my degree from Syracuse University in 2002. I immediately started working with people living in poverty, Black and brown folks, Spanish-speaking folks, people that were experiencing extreme forms of oppression. And so I started with mental health, and then quickly started working with people who were involved in gangs and working on violence. I originally wanted to be the next Dr. Ruth. Vic may remember that or not, but my plan was to travel the world and be next Dr. Ruth. And instead, what I found was that I couldn't focus on that level of intimacy and love until I understood the ways that people are blocked from it, the ways that people are oppressed and that violence is done unto them, and then they end up enacting violence. And then working with gangs, I started working with law enforcement. I became a probation officer in Syracuse, New York, and was the first woman of color promoted to an administrator position when I took over as assistant director of juvenile detention at Hillbrook Detention Center in Syracuse. And then went into education, went back to my alma mater at Mill River Union High School as a school counselor. So I've worked in mental health, law enforcement, education, and now I'm looking at child welfare because I want to understand the ways that these systems are working to promote or inhibit healthy individual and community development. And here's a few things that I've noticed over my years, right? The first one is that there's a code, right? Professionalism is one of the worst codes I've ever seen. And it's the easiest dog whistle to recognize for when people are trying to control certain behavior. I'm getting ready for my dissertation and I absolutely cannot stand APA format. I'm like, why are we even doing this? Why do we have APA and MLA and all these other different things? And for me, there are all different ways that we professionalize knowledge to keep people from it or to make it less accessible. So it's important to understand the ways that things like professionalism are used. Robert's Rules of Order here in Vermont. I don't know if I mentioned it anywhere yet. You're gonna hear me say that like 1,000 times, by the way. I founded the Rutland area branch of the NAACP here in Vermont, and then I was the Vermont state director. And one of the most horrible things about that was trying to learn Robert's Rules of Order. We did use it in collegiate a little bit, but it was, kind of softish. But man, oh man, in the like working world where you're trying to affect change, that stuff is highly regulated by things like Robert's Rules of Order. And these are all types of code that are used to establish order, but really what it does is control the narrative about who can speak, how, and when. So knowing the code is a critical component to being able to navigate white spaces and to understand how white folks talk. One of the funny things that happens sometimes as I'm out in the world doing the work is that people will say things like, well, why do I got to learn about Black history? Why do I got to learn about, Latino people? Like, they don't have to learn about us. And I'm like, well, you see, I've gone to predominantly white institutions my entire life. I live in Vermont, which is one of the whitest states, right? I'm surrounded by white people. All the people that I work with are white, or all the people in power above me are white. So understanding the ways that whiteness is infiltrating and sabotaging any attempts at healthy relationship development, or is a really critical component of knowing the code. We've had to study whiteness for so long as brown people. Just naming it for whiteness, naming it for what it is really a helpful piece. So again, you are not insane. You are not. These systems really are designed this way. The next piece is that systems have short memories. They like to forget things that they've said, or the ways that institutions backpedal, or the ways that they'll have one set of rules for constituents or consumers, or in a case like a college, for students, right? All students will feel loved and cared for, but what about the faculty, right? They also tend to forget incidents of harassment or wrongdoing. And that comes in part because of the way that that laws are written around what they can disclose or not disclose. But anyway, systems have short memories. I could get into a lot around that. And if somebody has questions specific to that, I can give you all kinds of examples. But know that they have short memories. So you're going to be the one that has to document and keep them honest and remind them of the things that they said and the inconsistencies between levels. If you hear that students are supposed to be loved, then faculty should be loved. And you need to make sure that that's happening. And if that's not happening, that's an indicator to you that that institution has a massive disconnect that is a part of white supremacy culture. Okay, as a person of color, you need to be aware of that. The next one, this one was really useful to me when I was working in education, is that people are desperate to keep their jobs. And I'm not saying that it's any sort of an excuse, but again, if you're going to be doing anti-racist work and you're going to be in a majority white institution, you're going to be allying with white folks and relying on them as well. And what I found here in my work was that people will only go so far. White folks will only go so far. You remember that question that I asked way back when in the beginning? What are you willing to lose? If you are a brown person doing this work in a majority white institution and you are going to ally with white people, you need to ask them that question, and they have to answer you honestly. And that answer has to be good enough. Or you need to use that answer to situate yourself in relationship to them, so you know where the potential danger lies, because it's going to be a long road, right, in doing this. So I say people are desperate to keep their jobs because in one of my positions, I did have a situation where I had a dear friend who I thought was, I called her the Negro Whisperer, because whenever I was getting out of control or uppity for the white folks, they would send her in to talk to me. And I'm like, the Negro Whisperer is here, right? And we were on the same page for the most part. And then it came down to another faculty member who was actively racist and doing some awful things around students. And this person was brought in, the friend, the Negro Whisperer, was brought in to kind of mediate the situation or assess the situation, and comes into my office and says, look, yes, this guy's racist. Yes, he's doing racist things. But there's not enough here in the staff guidelines, right? The staff harassment guidelines to nail him on it. So I've got to find that he did not engage in racist behavior. I said, no, you don't. We had this big long conversation. We were dear friends before that, but we stopped being friends because in the end, she said, I can't lose my job. And I said, well, then you just lost a friend. Because Again, you are not insane. The racism you experience in these places is real. But people are so desperate to keep their jobs and to keep the people above them happy that they will forget their commitment to being anti-racist in order to feed their families, because that's where their line is drawn. So that's why it is so critical that you ask that question. What are you willing to lose in service of our friendship, in service of the mission of anti-racism, if you have a friendship with them? And do not let go until they answer. Next slide. And by the way, this is all prepped for the work. We haven't even got to like, it is the work, but it's just prep for the work. Gloria Anzaldúa was another amazing person who really spoke to me throughout my journey of becoming an activist person. Nobody's going to save you. No one's going to cut you down, cut the thorns thick around you. No one's going to storm the castle walls or kiss awake your birth, climb down your hair, nor mount you onto the white steed. There's no one who will feed the yearning. Face it, you will have to do it yourself. And this is incredible for 2 points. And as you see up top, it says love yourself. The first thing you have to do is to be able to love yourself. And then the second thing is, like I said in the beginning, you are the one. There is nobody else who can do what you do or stop things from happening the way that you can make them happen. You know, I don't know if anybody's watching the Derek Chauvin trial right now, but every witness who spoke, who was there, including the EMT who tried to give George Floyd medical attention, everybody is feeling so guilty that they didn't intervene faster or do more. It's better to act more quickly than to wait and then worry for the rest of your life that you did the wrong thing. I end up looking really dumb most of the time because I'm like, well, I'm the only one that's going to do it. If we all kind of have that sense, you know, a little bit more of that sense, imagine what we could do. So the first part is around, you know, that piece. Don't wait for somebody else to do it. And the other part is that you will have to do in terms of loving yourself. It is so incredibly critical for me that you love yourself. So in the next slide, Chris is going to take us to. These are 6 of the self-love practices that I cannot stress enough. The first one is to say no. If you are a person of color doing anti-racist work in predominantly white spaces, one of 2 things is going to happen. One is that you will have a lot of real thirsty white people who really are interested and really want to do well and really want to center your voice and really want to follow your lead and really want, you know, this to happen, and they're going to set aside a whole day of professional development and, oh, could you come and lead that? Could you meet with the president today and help them understand? Could you maybe review this memo before I send it out? Can I call you when I have a staff issue because I want to make sure I do it right? And unless they are paying you or compensating you, which is the next one, the answer is no. And even if they are, if it is not part of your job duties and it is not something that you have room for emotionally or physically, the answer is no. And you're going to feel pulled. In places like Vermont, there are so few BIPOC, and people are clamoring to find us, to get us into their institutions, that it becomes exhausting. And and my friend Michelle is on here. Michelle is a secretary. She's the founding secretary of the branch of the NAACP. And one of my dear friends, Michelle, will tell you that I've had a horrible time saying no, because the desperation to do this work is so great, but you will be nothing if you cannot say no and set those boundaries for yourself. So say no. Do as much as you can within like self-presence. I don't want you to just like hop along or like kind of skid along and be like, okay, I got it, I can handle all this. No, I want you to thrive. Say as much yes as you can and still be able to thrive, and say no to everything else. The next piece is get paid. Y'all, it took me a while. It wasn't until about a year ago, when we started having all the protests and George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, you know, were all murdered. And I'm out there and I'm out doing my thing. I think I had, I'm speaking at 5 protests one weekend, dragging my family all around Vermont. I couldn't say no because these were my friends. I know it's a terrible thing, but like I said, I learned to say no. But the other thing is, like, I'm out there preaching to people, get paid, stop doing unpaid labor. There's already a Black tax. There's already a Latino tax. There's already all these taxes on your body, on your soul, on your being. just by existing in this space. The least you could do is get compensated in some way for it. And I'm sitting there preaching that as I'm like rushing to meet with the head of public safety to help come up with a 10-point plan. And I'm like, what the hell am I doing? And I do a little bit for free, but BIPOC have always been expected to work for free. We're done with that. Okay. And one of my friends, a white lady actually said, Tabitha, you're charging too little. And I said, what? She said, yeah, you can't charge that low. I'm like, but I don't know. I feel like I haven't earned the right. She's like, Tabitha, when you charge that low amount, everybody else has to go that low. So even if you don't think you're there just by people asking you to do the work. So get paid and pay yourself fairly. Make sure people are paying you fairly. The other thing around that is that people have no problem dropping hundreds of dollars for a lawyer per hour, for an electrician, for an architect. You and your knowledge of human relationships and anti-racism are worth more than all of those things, because at the end of the day, all we have are relationships when buildings crumble. So get paid the value of what relationships should be valued at and anti-racism should be valued at. The third is protect your time, which kind of goes a little bit along say no. This is one that I've learned the hard way. My family has taught me that I have not protected my time well enough. And when I say protect my time, that doesn't mean, oh, could I squeeze in another meeting? That means, ooh, I need to prioritize my connections with my kids. Ooh, I need to prioritize getting a massage or meditating. I need to build in another hour here for self-love. Protecting your time by building those things in first before you schedule everybody else's meetings and all that, when you can. Obviously, that there's some realism to that. Because like I said, in these white spaces, people will have that reaction where they really want you to be in it. And they really want all of your energy and time and everything that you have to offer. And remember, you are not an everlasting well, right? So that's one thing that happened. I never said that the other thing that happened is that they'll get really resistant. And either they'll ask you to prove everything, which again, unless it's your actual job that you're paid to do, being paid to do, is not your job. So you can say no, right? So that's kind of the other side of the people that will want you too much, is the people that will try to reject you. I think it was Adrienne Rich that said, we must resist that void that we are thrust into when people try to negate our experiences or identity. And that's a way that you have to say no, is that when people are trying to erase your experience as invalid, scream no, do whatever you have to do. And the next one, and this one has been critical, like I said, through my journey, is centering friendship and support. As my family was dealing with the racist attacks last year, circle of friends were everything. You have got to have a circle of people who understand what you're talking about, who understand the nature of anti-racist work. So build your friendships and your networks now, just so you can have them around you when something goes wrong or when you need to celebrate. The next one is to learn, love, and nourish your body. This one has been huge for me. I had a hip replacement at age 37 due to avascular necrosis. My body just started rotting away, and I'm keenly of the mindset that this is in part because of the anti-racist work that I was doing, and I was just taking it all in and not letting it out, and my body started rotting away. But you need to know your body in order to know when it's happy and when it's hurt. And this work sounds cerebral and feels emotional, but it's also physiological. It's also, in your body. It's also affecting your neural pathways. It's affecting everything about who you are. So it's so critical for you to learn your body and the ways that it moves and what it wants and what it enjoys, and to give it those things, to love your body in all the ways. You absolutely need to do that. And then you need to nourish it. That's a part of nourishing it. Loving is nourishing, but giving it the food that it wants, giving it the peace, the air, the things that it's looking for. Give it to your body, or you will not sustain in this work, especially in majority white spaces. And the last one is sleep. I really miss sleep. Sleep disruption, right? That's, when you think about, the way that your body and your brain kind of try to process everything that happened, you're going to need good sleep as part of your self-love. So if you can commit to even 2 of these a little bit better than you're doing right now, and use your friends to help you with that, and make sure that you're doing those things, you're on your way to self-love. Next slide, please. Protect yourself. This was something I kind of learned the hard way. I didn't have a security plan when everything happened last year, but I did have enough, friends and stuff to help me out with that. But have a security plan. And I know it sounds silly because you're thinking, you might be thinking like, oh my gosh, wasn't that overreacting? No, because when you are doing this work in majority white spaces, some bomb is going to land on you one way or another. Somebody's going to say something horrifying. Somebody is going to reject you. Somebody may target you. And when that happens, you need to be ready for it. You need to be prepared to protect yourself. And that may include moments of self-care, or it could include, actually, we had a security team. We had our neighbors that would watch our house. And my kids knew that, if something happened, that they would call so-and-so and that they would come. We had a social media team. And again, most people don't have this level, but we had a social media team that was monitoring all social media and Google reports. So anytime my name was mentioned in the press, they would get it. And if it was horrible, they would tell me, like when True North reports would find me and want to say something. My daughter was attacked for raising the Black Lives Matter flag at her school, not physically, by right-wing outlets. So we had to develop a security plan for her. So it can be really, really critical part of your existence is to have a security plan. What are you going to do when things hit the fan? The next one is document, process, and keep content. Oftentimes we tend to document the content, which is critical. You need to make sure that you are understanding what is happening, but how things are going down. That's where white supremacy plays out in systems. It's in the process, right? Because we're talking about systemic white supremacy. We're not just talking about the incidents where somebody says the N-word in the hallway. We're talking about what the institution does to respond to it. And what I have found is that 90% of institutional responses are poor, if poor, poor or not good at all, harmful. So document the process, keep the content, follow up in writing. These are two, like you can copy and paste this if you want to, but I start an email with, I want to make sure that I understand what we just went through. And I end it with, if I've misinterpreted or left anything out, please say so. Whenever I'm having conversations about race, racism, anything that's identity-based, I follow up, and these are the two, that's the beginning and the end, alpha and the omega of every conversation, because you never know when you're going to need it. And this presentation is being recorded, so don't feel like you have to take notes, and you can take the slides. I don't care. None of this is, sacred. But it is really important, and I hope you can find something. And I know I said this before, part of protecting yourself is saying no. Learn to say no, because if you're doing this work, that can be difficult. For the white folks who are on here, like I said, this presentation is designed to center BIPOC folks doing anti-racist work, not white folks. So around saying no, white folks, if you're going to be doing this work, since you're listening in, I challenge you to say yes, to pick up more, so BIPOC have to pick up less. Okay? You also need to, do the self-love thing. You need to do all those things too. But when we're looking at, where people are situated in this, try to say yes more so that BIPOC have to less. Okay? Keep evaluations, right? Because once you start really pissing people off and upsetting that apple cart, all of a sudden, you are really difficult to work with. Your professionalism is called into question. Right? So it becomes really important that you keep all of those little tidbits and nuggets just in case you need them. Plus, it's nice to go back and look at them, right? All the good things. Although sometimes evaluations aren't that great, but that can be helpful too. So if you do have to go to your local human rights commission to file a complaint, having that documented history around evaluations can be helpful. But I have found glowing recommendations come until you really push against somebody's racist boundary. So keep those evaluations, because all of a sudden when your evaluations go downhill and nothing's changed in your work, you're going to need that to protect yourself. And this one, leverage hypervisibility, is kind of a two-pronged thing. Again, if you are one of the few BIPOC in an organization, everybody's going to know it. You can use that as a couple of ways, because people are probably paying attention to what happens to you and making sure that your trusted few know what's going on to you is really critical. But you can also use that hypervisibility to call attention to the issues that you are trying to deal with in your organization. Okay, it can be a form of self-protection. What happened with me and my family when that happened, I had probably about four media outlets, four specific reporters that I trusted. Maybe it was three. And I immediately went to them because I knew that if I went to, first of all, because of the ways that white supremacy operates, and people know how to, especially the white supremacist groups here in Vermont, they know how to avoid police radar. And so even though I have the Attorney General's office calling me, the head of the Vermont State Police is calling me, everybody's trying to help me. I'm like, I know you can't help me because your system is designed to protect this. Because you have a certain standard of what is called harassment that does not include what is happening to me and my family, and you refuse to change that law. So I have to go into my own entities. So I was able to leverage my hypervisibility by going to these trusted media folks and telling my story. And as I told my story, the white supremacists began to back off, and I was able to get support. And I don't know if you're going to have that kind of leverage, that kind of hypervisibility like I did, but if you can, absolutely go there. Okay. You want to let Sadia in? Okay. And now we are going to next slide. Oh, James Baldwin again. I'm telling you, I can't get enough. I imagine one of the reasons, and this is really critical, right? I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hate so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with pain. This is what keeps me going in the middle of night when I am like, I can't do it anymore. When I've just had it, like with white people, when I've had it with white supremacy culture, when I've had it with trying to like understand why they're thinking the way that they are. Because it's got to be really lonely being at the top, being a white hetero cis man. Like it's got, I mean, sure, you got like all the trinkets and everything that you could possibly want in terms of services and stuff, but it's not earned. It's not, you know, it was given to you by destroying other people. And when you stop and think about the gravity of that, holy shit. When you think about what it means to stand on the ground of the indigenous people, like I know I feel some kind of way when I think that I'm benefiting from what happened to the Cayuga indigenous people, the Cayuga Nation, right? I, as a brown person, mixed race brown person, when we stop and think about the pain that has been done relationally over the centuries, it can be incredibly overwhelming. And then on the individual level, one of my potential dissertation topics, I have two, is talking about the role of repression in relationship to oppression. My belief is that in order to oppress, in order to be in that high up station, we've talked about this, we've seen this with cis men, right? Like how in order to be a real man, you have to give up family and crying and having emotions other than anger and laughing. I believe that that's true of all stations of dominant identities, that you've had to give up something so massive in order to be in those positions. What does that mean? What is that like, right? And then if we take it to even more of a surface level, when you ask somebody, what would it mean to know that you did something racist, to know that you benefited off the genocide of my people? Ask somebody. It's incredible because there's so much pain, and the inability to articulate it is right there. So for me, this helps me to humanize the people who are doing the harming, which is such a critical component to doing anti-racist work in white spaces. Going back to that thought James Baldwin said earlier about love, that we stop loving other when their disagreement is rooted in my oppression. For me, for Dr. King, for other people who practice nonviolent resistance, you don't stop loving them, but you are reminded of the ways that you must love them in order for them to be able to deal with their pain. And so that's where, again, that self-knowledge becomes really important. What are you willing to lose in that process? Because in order for us to move forward, we all have to kind of give up a little something. So that's what I had for your tips for tonight. Can we open it up and have a dialogue? We can take all that off there. Yeah.
Yeah, so everybody, please just feel free to unmute and ask your question verbally or raise your hand. We already have one raised hand. You can also type in the chat. So go ahead,
And
Sarah.
I would love to see you. Because again, remember, this is relationally based, and I'm like looking at like little like square boxes of like black holes.
I know, but Tab, I was in the garden and chasing a fox, and really, you don't want to see me.
I do want to see you. I haven't seen you in 21 years.
Exactly.
Listen, all right. Well, you get a pass. At least I got your amazing picture.
Yeah, yeah. It's just been a long day, but that's why the picture isn't up.
I'm just gonna say that Ellen showed her face for like 3 minutes. Okay.
She's the good one.
Exactly
She's the good
same.
one.
I know. Forget black don't crack. All right. Does somebody have a question?
Yes. Sarah, did you have a question?
Oh, no, I was just clapping.
Oh, hi, Sarah.
Hi,
Hey.
how are you? Good to see you. That was awesome.
It's a reunion. Hey.
It is. I'm so happy you did this.
Thank you.
I have my talk next Monday, and I think there's a lot of really interesting intersections between what I think we must be in sync right now. Because yeah, I think the concept of like setting the boundary, I am curious, if you have resources on how to do that fee schedule, because I'm in the middle of that conversation right now. Like the amount of, I'm working like 2-3 jobs, when I have one job, but I'm working this other job basically, kind of like handling how the organization deals with their issues. And it's, I think, I don't know, it's been really, I think one thing that feels challenging is to like give myself permission to take the step, you know what I mean? Because it's like, what is the credential for that, right? Like, what is the credential besides just like what you've experienced, so I think like, and to try to translate that to a professional, but it's not just that. I think about how much work we did as students, all of the meetings with administration, all of the planning, all of the organizational needs we were meeting as students. So it really, I think when you're a person of color at a predominantly white institution, you're learning that lesson from very young about how to organize with each other and make changes. So it's kind of hard, I think, to reflect that on a resume when really you've been doing it since you were 18, right? Like almost professionally, like organizing with administrators in a university or college. I mean, I think that, I don't know, I think that counts for something, but it's hard to kind of like claim those as actual skills.
Well, I would say that there's 3 things, about what you just said. The first is that in terms of that personal experience, that is what everything else is created on. That's what our systems are based on, is that nugget, that gold nugget of personal experience with racism. As I said earlier, we have so much experience with predominantly white institutions from the day we're born. We've been doing this our whole lives, whether you're 18 or 22 or 43 or however old, you have been in institutions that you had to study and understand white people and the ways that they think and know your whole life. So I would not discount that experience. And then second, I do think that, and I hope you speak to this next week, that those are really incredible skills, that as you are in college and you are pushing back and you are leading protests and you are meeting with professors and giving them curriculum, what you're doing is you're consulting. Those are all consulting skills. So I would get myself over to career service and be like, show me all of the potential jobs that a consultant does, and then pick out the ones that match what you just did with your professor or with your administrator or with whomever. And yes, that goes on your resume. And then the third thing that you mentioned was fee structure. I also want to give a shout out to my girl Sadia, who's on here. Hey, Sadia. Okay, first of all, what you do is more valuable than most everything that's out there, right? I mean, I think about lawyers' fees. and I charge about what a lawyer charges. I also am thoughtful about where and how I do that. So depending on the community that I'm working in, I'm looking at lawyer fees and consultant fees for that area, commensurate with that area. Tara, I see you too, honey. And charging based on that. And then when it becomes down to student, like high school student, college student, and BIPOC led, or people who are homeless and unhoused, who are asking me for something, it's free if it can be free. Or like if it's a college, I just ask for swag. Well, not colleges, high schools. I'll ask, like if it's a high school group trying to do those things, I'm like, just give me some of your swag. That's all I need. Because then I can wear that with pride. So yeah, girl, no less than 150. No less than 150.
That's hopeful. Thank you.
Yeah. Tara?
Hey, sorry for keeping my hand up and my post yoga hairdo, which is why my camera.
Don't apologize. Listen, we come as we are. It is 7:53.
Thank you so much. That was such a just beautiful and inspiring talk. And I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the self-care piece, and specifically about strategies you've come up with for saying no. I've just been noticing lately that this is something that I'm really struggling with, finding kind of the capacity to say no. And I'm also learning about myself that finding that ability is taking me a lot of energy. That like sometimes I'm the kind of person that it's like easier to just say yes than to deal with the struggle of figuring out how to say no. So just a piece that I'm really working on in the context of this work. And I would love to hear more about like how you develop that skill.
I'm still not great at it, but I'm getting better. So, okay, so how do I say no? One of the easy ways to say no is to find out what they're willing to compensate you for your time and your energy. And oftentimes people are like, well, I wasn't planning on compensating you anything. Be like, well, if I'm going to be consistent with what I'm going to be working with you around, which is, lifting and uplifting and valuing BIPOC, then you have to value me. And if you can't do that, I'm sorry, I can't be here. But I know, why don't you check with some other people and see if they were willing to. The other one is to look at my schedule. Like oftentimes for me, it's a matter of scheduling. I'm like, I couldn't possibly get to you until about 8 months from now. The third thing that I'll say, and be like, if you want to wait a year, like I might have the energy that at that point. The third thing that I'll do is I can say like, I don't have the emotional energy to deal with this right now. Just be honest. Like I don't have the bandwidth to give you what you need. And sometimes, like I said, sometimes it's just like, no, I don't have to give you a reason why. The answer is no. So where did I find that ability? I found that, last year I lost about a third of my hair. My kids were really upset with me all of the time. I felt like I was going to have a heart attack. And when your body is doing those things, your body, like, again, like, it's like when you don't listen to that part of you that says to speak up, your body will find ways to let you know that it's not happy, or, but it is hard for us to say no. Yeah. Particularly if you identify as female and you were raised in this society that teaches you to bend to the needs of others. Resisting is hard, but you'll be better for it. Trust me. Call me. I'll help you. You just call me. I'll just say no for you. Yeah, I'm serious. 802-774-8657. Ask Sadia. She knows.
Rachel, you have a question?
Yeah, actually, I was going to say, if people ask for your contact information, is it okay if I give it?
Yeah, that's fine.
Sometimes students will be like, oh, can you hook me up with that alum? So, okay, yeah. Cool, thank you. And then
just remind me who you are.
Sorry?
Just remind me who you are if you contact me.
Cool. So yeah, if anybody, shoot me an email if you need any speakers, contact info or alums or anything like that. Not so much a question, more just a comment, because I think I lived in Vermont for 12 years. So obviously my experience as a white woman, it was an easy experience for me, but I grew up in upstate New York, lived in Vermont for a dozen years. And I think Aurora is obviously so similar to a lot of, for anybody who doesn't know, like Burlington's very liberal, much like Ithaca. doesn't mean there's no racism there, but the rest of the state is like upstate New York. So if that gives you an idea, you know, you might see Confederate flags and it's very white. So I just wanted to thank you for being here and just being an alum who's engaged with our students. It's just something, and for our faculty and staff, just super important and awesome. And I think just really, I just keep thinking about, you know, our students who have said things like, talking about the microaggressions they faced in Aurora, with their experiences in Aurora specifically, and the like white people in the room. I'm obviously white, but the white people in the room who were like completely blindsided and oblivious to it, like they really had no idea that that was the experience that our students of color are having. And our campus is now over 30% students who identify as people of color. So definitely more than when you and I were students.
Yeah.
Anyway, a little long-winded, but I just like, I'm really grateful for you participating, and also just like having that background, like you've been a student in Aurora. I feel like it's very similar for you in Vermont, just knowing what I know about Vermont. And so I was just really excited to have you come and have this conversation, and thank you so much. I'm really grateful. And it's just something like I'm always gunning after, like the when institutions are like, well, we don't have money for funding or for the workshops, and you know, you have to put the money into it to make it happen, or you have to put the time into it. Yeah, I just feel like the more we ask for these things and make these things happen, we'll you know better and do better. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Actually, I really like what you just said there at the end about how we have to put in the money and the effort. You know, a lot of times what happens in predominantly white organizations is if they don't see an immediate return on investment and ROI that's, you know, monetary or, you know, explosion in student enrollment, then they think that it's not an endeavor that's worthwhile. But what I think about when that happens in predominantly white organizations is that this is restorative, this is reparative. You're just making up for the last 500 years. Don't even think about what's coming down the road until you've done what you need to with what's happening now, which is why, you know, I look at somebody like Vic and I'm like, who is standing around Vic when it comes to racial justice in the faculty at Wells College? Who among you, I think it'd be Chris and Rachel, I don't know who else on here is talking, I know Ellen, who all is doing the work so that Vic doesn't have to, so Vic can just exist and work with students and help students. You know, who's looking at Vic's programming and saying, this is restorative, this is reparative, this needs to be here, right?
Yeah, and I think like I sometimes will get questioned about like work that I do, how does it link to my job? My title is alumni engagement, and it makes sense to me that it's also connected. We can't be siloed. Like if I support students, that's supporting our future alums. So it makes complete sense to me. And my office is entirely white people, as far as I know, it always has been. So, you know, I can at least be vocal in my within my office and fight for, you know, workshops and trainings
and supporting curriculum. Yep. So if you see like Vic is fighting for curriculum stuff, then you need to be fighting with Vic, because there will be no alums, alums of color, especially if there's no programming that speaks to us.
Yeah, and speaking of that, you know, thank you, Tabitha, for providing this space for all of us to learn and grow together. You know, on that note, you said something really interesting earlier, that there's so much pain, but at the same time, there's an inability to articulate that pain. And I'm wondering, you know, for folks who are of a marginalized group at a place, whether it's a place as small as Wells or maybe a bigger institution that's less, you know, just not diverse, if you are trying to do this work as a member of that marginalized group and you don't have any allies or mentors, how do you go about kind of building those bridges and making allies who can help you in that work?
In a bigger organization, like I'm working with one organization right now that has 1,000 people, 1,000 employees, and maybe 30 of them are BIPOC. But like they brought me in to try to do this work, you know, so that they wouldn't feel so alone. But what I find is happening in those institutions is that people, you find each other and you find good enough. You find good enough until you can find good, and you make do. You eat moldy bread until there's, you know, healthier options. And it's not healthy and it's not good, which is where the self-care becomes so important. Because if you have to ingest toxicity, you know, white toxicness, in the workplace, then you're going to have to find it in other locations. So what I recommend to those people is if you're going to be doing it in your work, set up those boundaries, do the self-care, but then have that community outside of that space, which is what I ended up doing when I started the NAACP in Rutland, is because my workspace was so awful and so toxic and so unable to deal with racism that I had to find another way. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. Do we have anybody else have a question or a comment they'd like to make?
Tara co-founded Anti-Racist Pedagogy Collective. All right. Yes. That should be valued in evaluation.
Yeah, Tara's a professor at Wells. And also we had, and Leah Mackin as well. They're both on the call. They are doing a presentation next Friday with students about art and activism. So they taught a class together. So that's next Friday at 4:00. And we had, when we were working on our strategic planning process last summer, we had over 90 people who were volunteers, faculty who weren't being paid to be there, staff, alums, to work on a lot of the initiatives, and then showing up. If there's a workshop during lunch hour that goes until 2:00, they're showing up for them and participating and speaking up. And I really appreciate that. That's been something since I came to campus in 2019, and just saying like, yeah, people need to show up and participate, and we can all do better.
Yeah, and I'm really glad to hear that. Are Leah and Tara both white identifying? I don't know. I see the word allies, so I'm assuming. One of the things that I realized last year when I was in the middle of a presentation, and I'm like, in order for racism to end peacefully, white people have to get it. Because it will end, but either way, it's going to end. But if we want it to be a peaceful solution, a peaceful resolution, white people have to get it, because we didn't create this, right? So I'm glad to hear that Tara and Leah, are getting that, and we need those people, the white people who can be white people whisperers, so that when you do get in touch with that pain, Chris, when white folks do start to get in touch with their pain, that they have somebody somewhere they can go where people understand the white tears, that they're not drowning, BIPOC in them, that they have a place, because you have to be able to cry. You have to be able to deal with the pain and the shame that comes with benefiting from systems of supremacy. You have to have that location before you can come to the table with BIPOC, I would say.
Okay, well, I want to thank everybody, and especially Tabitha, for this incredible discussion. We are going to get this posted on YouTube, on the Wells YouTube channel, as soon as we can. And if you have any questions or you want to get in touch with Tabitha later on, just don't hesitate to send us an email at communications@wells.edu, or you can reach out to Rachel or me individually. Our information's on the site. So
I was just going to say too, if you're a student on the call, thank you for being here. I know you have a million things to do. If you come to other events this month, and I hope you do, you don't have to register. You'll get emails each week from communications. So just show up. We've got 2 more things this week. If you are an alum or a friend, thank you. All of the events can be found on alumni.wells.edu. And I was scrambling to find Sid Abad is on this call, and they did a zine about organizing for Black Lives Matter protests, I think protests in general. Oh, there it is right there. Thank you. I'm like, awesome. I was scrambling. I was texting Emily in communications going, where's the link? I want to share it. So first of all, just super cool. And I also just emailed Sid your email address, Tabitha. Sid just did a BLM protest in Seneca Falls last summer and organized it. And it's just a cool little tool. So make sure you check that out, please. Yeah, I think that's all I have. I'm really glad you all came tonight. I know you all are in meetings all the time, so the extra just to be here is really awesome.
Absolutely. And our next Activism Series presentation will be this Wednesday night, same time, 7 o'clock Eastern. Nicole Minton, class of 2009, will talk about how to remain true to yourself and preserve your authentic voice. So thanks. This is a great kickoff to the Activism Series. Tabitha, we can't thank you enough, and thank you all for coming.
Yeah, Syra actually started the Activism Symposium And sorry, I'm so excited.
It's awesome.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. And Friday is a yoga session. It's an anti-racist yoga practice. It's actually a yoga session. So wear comfy clothes if you come at 4:00.
Awesome. All right. Have a great night, everybody.
All right, bye,
Thank
y'all.
you.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, Tabitha.